And even though she has left the Bronx, and we do forgive her, uh, the book was wonderful, and I'm happy that it was chosen. So not gonna say any more. Brandon,
Hey.
hey,
Hi.
take it
It's so
away.
good to see everyone. We just to kind of piggyback off of what Ron just said, everyone has been so engaged with these pages. We have argued, we have cried, we have truly enjoyed kind of like the melancholy and the sadness, if you will, and I mean that in the best way possible, of all of these stories. I know everyone, I talk a lot usually during these sessions. However, since Kim is here tonight, and I know everyone probably has a lot of questions for her, I was wondering if we could just try to keep the questions focused on the pages, so everyone can kind of get a question in if they have one. But if everyone in the book club is cool, I would actually like to start with Bars, which is the last chapter, or the first of the last section that we read. It's super short, one of the shorter pages, and I kind of want to open the floor up. Like I talk so much usually, I kind of want to open the floor up to if anyone else has any questions. But one question that I have that I would like to hear Kim talk a little bit about, as far as Bars is concerned, is one question that I had almost in every single story that we read was it intentional that the father was absent? Again, even in these two short pages, this family setting, the father is absent. And that theme for me was really big in all of the chapters and all of the short stories that we read. And then especially in American, especially when we're talking about mass incarceration and like the prison industrial complex almost stealing a lot of fathers away. I was really curious in Bars if it was the mother or the father, and Kim can answer or anyone in the book club can answer, but I was really curious if it was the mother or the father who was behind Bars.
It's the mom. It's a mom. It's a mother. It's the mother. She went with her aunt to visit her mother, and was disappointed at the end when she wasn't able to see her and talk to her. So it was definitely the mother that she was going to visit, the main character.
Can you talk about the missing man just a little bit?
So I remember watching it, and I think I was so just inspired by the observations about the term the missing man and how it relates to my stories. And it wasn't, I don't think it was intentional, because usually when I write the first drafts of stories, it's just about getting the story out. The stories in my collection, I did not outline. Outline them. And some writers, if I'm not mistaken, have outlined their work before writing them, but I did not outline. I just wrote. And the idea of the missing man was something that was not on the forefront of my mind as I was writing these stories. Yet, in reflection, it was an observation that I found fascinating. And I had to even do some more reflection as to, why? Why in the majority of my stories, there seems to be a father figure who's not present, whether is not physically present or emotionally present. So that's something that I have thought about, and I thank you. I thank you for speaking about that.
Especially with bars, just because traditionally, right, it is the father that is in prison. Traditionally, you don't see a lot of women in prison, especially mothers who have, children of age. So,
but let me
we do see
excuse
it in
me.
almost all the stories.
Excuse me. More and more women are being incarcerated today. Really, there are a lot of women who are incarcerated. So I'm just just correcting that part. Yeah.
That's very true, but traditionally more men are incarcerated, more fathers are incarcerated than more mothers are incarcerated. Does anyone else have a question about bars before we kind of jump in?
I like the way it led up to, like the honest taking the little girl, and we didn't really know where the aunt was taking her. And then at the end, you see that it was, to the prison to see her mother, and I just like that, suspense in a way, that was very good. Yeah.
Was that intentional? Because at some point I didn't know that that's where they were leading to. For a moment I thought they were going to like a recital or something to that effect, like something happy. And then it just like hit you at the end. Like you did that spectacularly in 2 pages.
Right.
Where, I was like, oh, it's a jail, what? And then like all these emotions came flooding in, and like I remember being in those situations where I had to, and then I'm like, oh, she's talking about that bus. Like, did you have like a specific, like, like Rikers Island or something that like that in mind, when you were writing the stories?
So thank you for your question, Martha, and then your kind words. I'm really, really grateful. So with bars, it was, I think maybe in the first or second draft, I was more mindful of, okay, let's take the reader on a journey, right? This story is in the perspective, even though it's written in the second person, it's in the perspective of a girl who is excited and who is focused on seeing her mother. Yet when the reader is reading it, if the reader doesn't know what she is excited, who she's excited to see, or where she's going, then it might increase the chances of the reader maybe empathizing with the girl in terms of potentially also feeling disappointed, right? It's, if readers can empathize with my characters, if they can empathize with feeling alone or estranged, then as a writer, I have done my job or I've accomplished one of my goals. So yes, I believe in writing that out, there was this intention of, okay, I could make the choice of revealing early where she's going, but let's save that for the end, so that a reader could potentially have empathy for being disappointed, right? Or relating to the character when she's disappointed.
Yeah, that hit me hard. I was like,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's a great read, though. Like, I was emotionally invested in a few stories in here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't read so far, but as you were speaking, I was thinking, did you intentionally wanted to protect the mom by doing that? Because somebody also mentioned, this idea that they are more men, but then traditionally you don't see the women. The women are taking care of the kids at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
But mom now is in jail. Like, did you make that also with the intention to protect that we don't kind of pass judgment like that? oh, she has done something really bad now to be in jail. What kind of mother is she?
It's so in the story, thank you for your excellent, awesome question. So in the story, the story, my story doesn't spell out, or it doesn't discuss what the incident was, right? The reason why she was in jail, in prison, and you know, in putting that word in italics, you know, the incident, it's a way to emphasize how consequential that incident was, but at the same time, how the incident itself um, was not the focus of the main character. She just wanted to see her mother, right? Um, so that's why I didn't highlight or even explain what the incident was. Not saying that it didn't matter in the context of the story, but in that day when she is visiting, or when she's traveling with her aunt to see her mom, that wasn't what was on her mind. It was just that excitement and joy in the idea that she would be reunited with her mother again. Now, in terms of, you know, you know, the, like, why is it a mom? You know, instead of a dad, it's, you know, it is true that while there are men who are, you know, currently in prison, there are also women in prison, and what does it mean when a woman who is, you know, in prison, when she's also a mother, and what can be the emotional challenges? Now, it's not from the mother's point of view, it's from the girl's point of view, her daughter's point of view. But many of my stories really tries to answer the question of what are the emotional ramifications of when things happen. What does it mean for two people who are in who are connected to each other, whether it's a family relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a romantic attachment? What are the emotional consequences when two people who care about each other are not able to relate to each other? Um, I hope that answers the question.
Tasha, do you have a question?
Yeah, it was more like a comment. I mean, from what I read, it was great. You should have heard our commentary. We was going back and forth every week. It's great. But I wanted to say, in hearing what you're talking about, for me, when I read Bars, what I appreciate about that story is that you brought humanity back into the conversation, right?
Thank
And
you.
I think it's so profound, especially when in our current situation, you're just hearing about a lot of inhumane practices that are happening to people who are incarcerated. And it's just like, just because you did something bad and you're put in a situation doesn't mean it needs to be compounded with more inhumane practices. You know what I mean? Like, and so I just thought that you did a really phenomenal job in reminding people that there are humans in this space, right? And how do we remind ourselves to engage with humanity? Because again, without putting the incident into context, it allows for more nuances around that. Like, were you wrongly accused of a crime? You know what I'm saying? Were you incarcerated because of some ridiculous law? Were you in self-defense? Like, it allows for that context to open up and humanity to show up. And I was just like, yes, because, and then when, to piggyback on what Marta said about, oh, you know, she was going to a happy place. Oh, damn it, it was jail. But in the context of the daughter, any place where her mom is a happy place, right? So I just love that really just eradicated the walls and it just made space more expansive. And I just thought that was
Thank you, Tasha. Thank you so much. Your words mean a lot to me. Thank you. I'm so appreciative, and I hope my readers of my work will empathize and will feel for the characters in terms of sympathizing with them, empathizing with them. I feel bad if readers are sad from reading my work, because I never want anyone to be sad. Yet, if those feelings can increase empathy, then, again, I still don't want anyone to be sad. But, I'm all for empathy. I'm all for empathy.
Some of your stories were sad, though.
I was just gonna say that, Ron. I was just gonna say that.
Go ahead, Brandon.
I was gonna say this, I have to say this, that in bars, even though like we didn't get the daughter didn't get to meet the mother, I thought about this. If she did get to meet her, it did set for a very tense and emotional meeting between a mother and a daughter. And that tense and emotional meeting between mothers and daughters, we've seen throughout this entire collection. And it's been pretty sad at times. So does anyone have any thoughts on that idea of like the mother and the daughter and the tension there in a lot of these stories? And then in this story, us kind of not getting that tension, us not getting really that, in this sense, the tension would have been the relief. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if I can jump in, because this is a related comment that a question that I have.
Yeah.
Both on like two responses you've given, Kem Joy, about in this discussion, one of which is the structure overall. I think it's really amazing that you created, when I saw locked gray, linked blue, that could mean lots of things. And what's so beautiful about reading the whole collection all the way through is to see the way that you locked in and linked these two. I mean, the colors often convey sadness or maybe hope, but like the blue is the blue of blue black, the blue of depression, the blue of sadness as well. So I'm intrigued, one, in the way like structurally how you managed to do that, since you mentioned you don't outline. Was that conscious as a writer through your own editorial process? Was it through the process of getting it published and what the feedback you got was? But then also something else you said that isn't just merely about format and structure, that I find really interesting, is that you specifically called out the way that different characters have an inability to relate, which I think goes back to Brandon's point. And that's something that really struck me, was everyone has these really intense blinders on. And as a reader, you're just watching like Adams box off Adams, except they're not Adams, they're family members.
So you're absolutely right, and thank you for your kind words. And Camila, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Sorry, I muted, but yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, Camila. So regarding locked gray, linked blue, I think a reader in a previous meeting quoted an interview in terms of the meanings of it, which I thoroughly appreciated. It was so amazing. It was just really wonderful. So I apologize. I don't know, or I don't recall the name, but thank you so much. So with locked gray, linked blue, you're right. Blue does represent sadness, and gray represents uncertainty. Right? So the term locked gray, it's when two people are in a relationship, right? Sometimes there can be this sense of permanence, right? So even if two people are, even if their relationship, regardless of what the relationship is, whether it's like a family relationship or a friendship or a romantic attachment, whatever that relationship is, if the relationship itself is not permanent, there's a good chance that the memories and the ramifications, the emotional ramifications of that relationship will be permanent, or a high chance that it would be. So locked, you know, there's a sense of permanence in terms of how people can affect each other, right? And then gray is uncertainty, right? That if two people are locked together through their connection, that in itself can be very uncertain. It may not be as clear, you know, or as clearly defined in terms of the expectations within that relationship. Linked blue, sadness, melancholy, linked represents those connections, what those connections are. This idea that when something is linked, that they're connected. So my stories reflect that in various degrees. Now, in terms of the selection of it, I had an idea for the title after I realized that I had written enough short stories that would fit together in a collection. And ultimately, I came up with Locked Gray, Linked Blue. And blue is my favorite color. Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful, brilliant color that can have so many meanings. And I think gray is a fantastic color too. But did I answer your question?
Yeah. I think there's so many other questions, like keep going.
But thank you for your question. Thank you so much.
If anyone doesn't have any other questions on bars, I would love to move on to the next story, The Glowing Conqueror, which was...
I have one question. I have one question regarding bars. Well, not a question. It's, you know, something I noticed, that you include the system there, because the mother, the system moved that mother someplace else, and so the child could not see her, you know, and it just shows the cruelty of the system, that they would do that and not inform the aunt or inform the, you know, the child, you know. So that was just a comment there.
Thank you.
The Glowing Conqueror, I feel, was definitely the most surprising, I guess, maybe I would say. As far as craft is concerned, maybe it was just, I don't want to say it was the most creative, because I don't feel that in my heart, but it was just the most, maybe it just stood out because it was more fairy tale like. I would really love to hear some of the thoughts from the ladies, or Ron, in the book club about the Glowing Conqueror.
I love that. I loved it.
Yeah, I loved it too.
I loved it. It just, okay, so when I read the story, I don't know if anyone has watched Watchmen on HBO. It immediately reminded me, I was like, oh my God, I think they stole her story. I was making drama around this, right? And then, but yes, but then I was like, okay, Marta, is this, like, what's happening? She's, the young girl has always lived in like this mystical, you know, mystical space. So in the end, did she just fracture? Like, is that what happened? I'm sorry.
Hey, girl.
So yeah, so I was wondering if that was real. Like, what we were reading, was it real, or was it in her mind? Did she break after her family? She lost everything. She lost like her, is that the same story where she lost her mom and her mother killed herself, right? Did her mother kill herself? No.
I think
the mother was murdered.
She was murdered.
And her brother went with the other family.
Right. I thought the mom killed herself because she took care of it. It was like, in the words was like, she took care of it. But she lost her mom, and then she gained this new family, and then she lost all of it in a fire. And I was like, she's fractured, like her mind is gone. So was it real? Were these powers real?
So the powers in the context of the story were real. were real. It wasn't a dream sequence. They were real. And Marta, thank you so much for your feedback, your kind words. Regarding, it's interesting you mentioned Watchmen, because I saw Watchmen, and I think it's a brilliant show, brilliant show. And I don't want to spoil the show for anyone who hasn't seen it. The last scene, right? The last scene, there's this strong implication, and it did, and I did think about my story, my work. And Watchmen, if I'm not mistaken, I think it came out on HBO in 2019, and my book came out in 2018. I don't think there's any, when you mentioned like drama, I don't think there's any drama regarding that, because Watchmen is actually, Watchmen is a comic book, right? It's a comic book that came out a long time ago. But I did think about, like my work, which the short story in the collection was published before Watchmen came out. So it's so funny that you mentioned that. But I don't think, or I don't hope there's any drama. But I think Watchmen was a brilliant show. It was really amazing. But back to your question, in the context, in the Glowing Conqueror, the experiences that that Genevieve goes through, they're real. They're real. Her powers are real. Well, in the fictional story.
Just listening to you now, like that blue is your favorite color, and in the character, like she glowed blue. I think that just like really brought it all together for me. And even just the title of the book and the link blue and when I read that part, I was like, oh, okay. It just kind of like everything came together for me. Yeah, this was one of my favorite stories, honestly. Like I felt like a sci-fi ghetto story. Like, you know what I mean? I was like, I like it.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. That means so much. I'm so happy you enjoyed it.
It's good.
Thank you.
The part of the story about conquering blue that touched me was when she said, I'm shining so brightly, and yet you still don't see me. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, how many women in particular feel that way, that I'm doing the best that I can, I'm being as good as I can, and yet I'm still invisible. And so to me, that was the touching part of the story, is that she did, she had all of this glow, and yet to the people that she really cared about in her early life anyway, she was still invisible.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you shared that observation.
I like the first line, second paragraph. Perhaps she was a villain. None of the villains look like her either. It was just like, I just love that moment where she's, even though the word princess comes up and representation is very key, I love that she couldn't find herself in this villainous way. You know what I mean? And I was like, check. I'm okay for you.
Yeah, she didn't see herself. She didn't see herself reflected. And I think that's something that many people of color have experienced in different ways. Not seeing themselves reflected in just in society, in art, in various forms of art. So it's, but thank you. I'm really glad you enjoyed, those sentences. Thank you.
I'm sorry, did anyone, was someone else about to ask a question? I think that, and this is a brand new thought, I just had it. However, when I hear you, Kem, talk about a lot of Black women not really seeing themselves reflected and in society and just in all ways, in media or whatever, one story that really comes to mind, and I'm blanking on the name. It was called Made Adrift. So the idea, and this is a brand new thought, but y'all work with me. Let me know if you feel me on this. Like sure, like we can think about fairy tales, Grimm Brothers, you know, things like that, or even like Disney movies. You don't see a lot of Black people, a lot of Black women. But I was thinking about this, especially when I was just hearing Tasha's talk and Kim talk about Made Adrift, when the daughter was getting married, or the daughter's mother was getting married, the daughter was the bridesmaid. And we also, I mean, let's keep it real, we also don't see a lot of black women being married either in society, right? Isn't like the Black woman the last to get married, or in America at least, the population of Black females being married is the smallest? That was for some reason, Made Adrift just came to my mind in that sense of representation. I felt that the main character was very frustrated that she wasn't getting married. I felt she was a bit jealous of her mother, and that frustration of not seeing that representation, right? It can come in so many different forms. And I think in this book, it presents itself in almost every single page. That frustration of representation. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to anyone else? Or can I get an amen, as the pastor would say?
It's, you know, Mercy in Made Adrift, Mercy was envious of her mother. She was envious. Mercy was envious of her mother. Mercy was frustrated with her mother, and yet, you know, Mercy was relieved. I mean, she felt a various array of emotions, which I think weddings can often weddings can often
they go to amen. They go to amen. They go to amen. The weddings. God damn.
Weddings, I find that weddings sometimes can be emotional barometers, right? Can be barometers of how close someone can be to the two people getting married, and how prioritized folks can be. So I think weddings, not all, but some can spur complex emotions. So Mercy experiences those. She experiences jealousy, she experiences relief, she experiences frustration. She even experiences a bit of joy after her mother walks down the aisle. You know, that her mom has someone who will prioritize her, who'll put her first.
Can you talk about that tension just a little bit more? The idea, the tension of the mother and the daughter, because you're talking about Mercy a lot, but what is Mercy's connection to her mother? That was a really tense story. I mean, she left with the women's wedding dress to have a glass of wine. Like, she not to get it fixed, but to have a glass of wine. Like, when we're talking about, I love when she took the dress too, Tasha. That was one of my favorite points in this whole book, was when she took her dress. Can you talk about that idea, that tension between the mother and the daughter that we almost see show up in almost every story?
I think it's a reflection of how emotionally complex relationships can be, and what do people do? I'm fascinated by the emotional navigation of various relationships. How does someone move forward when they really care about someone, but they're not able to successfully relate to them? You know, what does that look like? And a number of the stories in my collection tries to answer those questions. So it's, you know, it's.
I agree. I know a lot of other ladies here agree as well. We talked about it a lot, and that idea. Does anyone else kind of want to jump in before we move on to the next story? Or, I mean, it's already 8 o'clock. if we want to move on to the last story, we can. Or if anyone wants to bring up another story, since I already kind of opened the bubble with Midrift, please someone jump in.
I'd like to ask Kem Joy a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's not related to any specific story in the book, but I would love to hear like a two-part or twofold question is, what was your favorite story in the book, and what was a story that you were very emotionally attached to?
Wow. Thank you so much, Barbara. I really appreciate your questions. So my favorite story, that's a tough question to ask, only because, you know, all of my stories mean so much to me. But I'll try to answer it by saying, which one of my stories is my favorite? I guess it depends on the context. So maybe one of my favorite stories to read out loud is True Perfect. I really enjoy reading True Perfect out loud.
I'm sorry to interrupt. What do you mean when you say read out loud? Is that what you actually mean, like reading it out loud vocally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
okay.
readings. I really enjoy reading True Perfect out loud. I think I might have my story almost memorized. You know, I could probably recite a good amount, you know, from my mind. But I love reading True Perfect out loud. So I don't want to say True Perfect is my favorite story that I've written, but it's a story that I just love reciting. You know, even with the first lines, we have the talk. We're sitting on your living room floor, facing each other, listening to Al Green on your stereo. You say you want me in your life for good. I really love reading that story out loud. So that's my favorite story to read out loud, True Perfect. And the second part of the question was, I'm sorry, what was the second part again?
It's kind of the same, but it's which story are you emotionally attached to?
Emotionally attached to, thank you. Wow. Wow. Ooh. That's a tough one. That's a tough one to answer. That's a tough one. I'm emotionally attached to all of them. You know, as the writer of them. Let's see. I'm going to say I'm emotionally attached to all of them. I probably won't say which one I'm the most emotionally attached to. But yeah, I am attached to all of my work. You know, it's anything you produce, anything you create. There's a very good chance that there is going to be this sense of connection and attachment, especially if so much work went into it. So I'm attached to all of them. I'm attached to all my stories.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Made me think like when moms has kids, and you know, you had kids, and all of them, they are your favorite. Kind of hard to say which one is the favorite. But I have a question about the first story.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit the relationship between Chioma and her sister? And I'm going to play a little bit like Barbara. If you were change the story, how would you change the end? If you had the opportunity to go back, you said you do a lot of reflection.
Wow, thank you so much for that amazing question. Orphelina, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you. So, this is exciting. Okay, so how would I change the end? So, well, Demetrius, you know, Demetrius is a very, it's a very meaningful story to me. All my stories are meaningful, but Demetrius, it's very, there are times where I've had questions about like my own story. And actually the last story in the collection, Her Mother Nneka, was my opportunity to answer some of those questions by basically writing it from Chioma's perspective. In terms of, what were Chioma's thoughts? What was their sister relationship, their sibling relationship like from her point of view? And Her Mother Nneka, I was able to answer those questions by just writing it out from her character. If I could go back and change Demetrius or Her Mother Nneka, maybe I'd be a little kinder to the characters. maybe I would consider writing maybe sort of like a future story, a story where it takes place in the future, maybe 5 years or 10 years later, just to see where Colleen and Chioma are and how they're doing and what their sibling relationship looks like in the future. So maybe I wouldn't change the stories as they are, but maybe I would consider, maybe changing their sibling relationship, maybe making their relationship more kind, and more, more kind. But thank you for that question. Thank you.
Did you write the two of those stories at the same time? Were they continuous and you broke them up, or did you write one and then write the other stories and then come back for the bookend?
Thank you, Linda. So Demetrius was first, and actually Her Mother Nneka was the last story I wrote for this collection that I wrote and then was included in the collection. So Demetrius was first, and I wrote Demetrius first before Her Mother Nneka. And I was really curious about Chioma's perspective. And I was like, okay, well, let me write the story just from her perspective. The scenes where Colleen is, she's waiting for a party to start. Well, what did that look like? From Chioma's perspective, what were some of the things that she was thinking when she and Ken were getting ready to move themselves and their sons back to Nigeria? Actually, I have a question. Is it okay if I pose a question to everyone?
Yes.
Yes, please do. Yes.
So in Her Mother Nneka, the last story, I remember watching the book club discussion about Demetrius, about the story, and it seemed like there were some book club members who were like Team Chioma, and maybe some who were Team Colleen, maybe. There seemed to be, or rather, I should say, there seemed to be some feedback about Chioma and her treatment of her sister, just how she treated her. After reading Her Mother Nneka, do you think the same way? Do you feel the same way about Chioma's character, or is it the same?
I'd like to comment on it, because I think that was one of the stories that you may have seen me on the video being pro Chioma, but I don't know if it was pro Chioma. I think it was more, I understood, and from the very beginning, I'm very happy that you wrote this story towards the end, because I realized that what I was feeling or what I was seeing was exactly right, or exactly what you probably perceived it is. I think that Chioma just felt like an obligation, a very strong obligation to take care of her sister. Mm-hmm. I do see that there was some kind of hatred because of the dad and his infidelities and how he treated. I'd like hearing more the side of Chioma on this perspective, but I see that, I mean, I'm still pro Chioma. I still feel like she still felt responsible for her sister at some point, even though she told her dad, oh no, like let her mother take care of her. Her mother's still alive wherever she is. I just felt like that was her sister. She, even though it was her half sister, she still felt like a certain obligation. Even though she didn't want to do it, it was kind of in her heart to take care of her sister. I don't know if you agree with that or if that's along the lines of how you were writing it.
Yeah, so when writing Demetrius is really from Colleen's perspective. So it was written in first person. So one of the challenges of writing a short story in first person is that oftentimes using the word I and me, one of the challenges that can happen is trying to create enough of a distance between the writer and the character writing a story in first person. It's easy to write I went here, or I said this, and sometimes if you're writing in first person, it could be very easy to not completely write from the perspective of that character. With her mother Naneka, writing in third person, I think it made it easier to sort of write from her perspective, because I think there was like more distance, or at least for me in terms of the writing process. I think it can be easier to have more distance when writing from the third person perspective. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, with writing, sometimes, I mean, most of my work I don't outline, or these stories, it's not like I create an outline and where it would be easier to sort of map out, okay, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. When I write, I just write. So it just made sense that Chioma would, of course, love her sister, but because of the circumstances surrounding their sibling relationship, it would be hard for her to fully convey that love through words, and it would be harder to prioritize her. So Demetrius and her mother Naneka is a story about two people who care about each other, but find it difficult to connect and relate to each other. And in her mother Naneka, Chioma finds it difficult to prioritize her sister. What happens when someone loves someone but they don't prioritize them?
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say that story was actually hard for me to read, because I'm the eldest of two, and my sister and I are extremely close. But then I also have cousins who have like half siblings, and this idea of the half is foreign. Like I can't contemplate, I can't digest it, because there's still blood that flows through the person, and so like I felt like Chioma was the barrier to them having a truly unconditional relationship. Because and I found it also to be ironic where she says the man of her dreams was the man with no dreams, just goals and achievements, but yet she's like, oh, her sister needs to have ambition, needs to have all these things. And I'm just like, but you just said your man ain't got none of that, but she needs to pair up with someone that does. So you find like these ironies in their relationship. But then I feel like when you hear the story of like the mom had already passed away at that time, you know what I mean? And then the sister can't control how she's brought into this world, you know what I mean? So like even with the language, the language, you could teach her the language too. Like it just felt like all of that was then put on the father, and she's just like, I'm just dealing with the scrap. So for me, what came up was, I feel like obligation is not synonymous with love, right? Sometimes you can do things just because there's a relationship that may be permanent, or when you talk about the permanence, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's love. You know what I mean? Driven by obligation versus being driven by love, for me, are two separate things. And I felt when that was solidified, when Colleen said to her sister, like, you know, I'm gonna come out in Nigeria in a couple of years. And she was like, oop, yeah, okay, sure. We'll talk about that later. That was a clear example that she was the one that was creating the distance in their relationship versus trying to cultivate something that was more substantial.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying, like, when you said, you know, the father was saying Colleen's mother was his soulmate, and she almost like, well, you have no soul. Like, if that's, you know, if you can connect to her, like, you don't have, you know, this woman who's so foreign to us, she doesn't know our culture, and you're not teaching your daughter our culture. And this is why I'm not connecting to her. And so that's what, you know, when you said, do you feel, you know, better about Chioma? Like, I do feel better about her now, like hearing her side of the story and understanding, you know, where all this was coming from, her anger, you know, and to hear that your father had a soulmate other than your mother, you know, it's very hurtful. And like all the things that, you know, that came with it, and just what Colleen represented for her, and that they weren't family, and that it was all her father's fault in the way, you know. It just seemed like that was their culture of bringing people into their family, and now we can't do that with her because of this mistake that you've made.
I think on top of that too, like, it's really not to be the title person tonight, but like the way you titled it was like such a strong signal once I got all the way through, right? So to build on Tasha's point, there are plenty of really close half siblings, right? You can make different choices. You cannot be raised together, find each other in your 40s and get super close, right? But I think for Chioma, she felt such a strong identification with her mother, and the fact that she lost her mother when she was quite young. And it seems like the only regret this woman has in her life is that she didn't say, I love you. And ironically enough, it's a regret that comes from her father saying, go in and say what you need to do. So she, in a certain way, disobeys her father and is left with the one thing, I shouldn't say one guilty thing, because there's moments, this is what struck me in her story, was that she experiences plenty of guilt and self-doubt, but it's not the guilt of the pain she inflicts on her sister. It's her guilt about even feeling guilty about it. Like, I'm misrepresenting it, but it's not the pain she's causing, it's her like shame about her own pain in the moment, which to me just goes back to her own kind of internal myopia. And I think going back to what Tasha was saying, we can call that love, but it's such a qualified love that, at least in my perspective, I can't call it love. But I do appreciate these being the bookends, and I appreciate getting the opposite, not the opposite, but the other character's story, because I don't remember where I was at the beginning of the book club. I suspect I wasn't Team Chioma, but I think I was a little bit more equivocal. And now I have some very hard feelings towards her. But the beauty of the writing, though, is that the writing allows for me not to turn her into a two-dimensional character. She's actually three-dimensional. She has really complicated emotions and lots of denial. But it was interesting to get those two and to see how both children are grounded in one particular parent. And if you were to revisit it, I would imagine they don't get closer, they follow those lineages, but like happenstance brings them back together. But that's just a wild guess. Anyway.
You know, I just want to say something really quickly before you respond, Kim, that for me, you know, Demetrius and her mother, Naneka, you know, I probably can agree with what Tasha said. I can agree with what Rachel said, and I can agree with what Camilla just said. But you know what? For me, I think that what really opened my eyes in these two stories was the idea of, yeah, you're right. It wasn't love. It was locked. You see what I'm saying? Like, it was locked and linked, if you will. Like, no, it wasn't love. We don't love each other. Even though we're sisters, like, no, we do not love each other. We are locked together. And for me, that like really kind of solidified the idea of the title, or half of the title. That idea that you don't need love to be like to have a human emotion and attachment to somebody. It doesn't have to be love. It can just be you're locked in with them. You're in it to win it. You're locked together. It doesn't necessarily have to be love. And I think that's what really trips us up a lot, right? And a lot of these pages we're like, oh wait, no, she didn't love him, or he didn't love her the way he should have loved her. I think like that really opened my eyes in a lot of these stories. It's like, yeah, that's the whole idea. It wasn't love. They were locked together. Does that make sense?
Can I ask a follow-up question about that? I mean, it makes me think about, I mean, just hearing everyone speak, we can hear just like the complexities of relationships, right? Like they're not linear, right? Like you're exploring all the relationships in the stories, and this obligatory love versus this obligation versus real love, like being locked versus linked, right? And I think Tasha's the one that brought it up. It made me think about proposed, right? And this complex, complicated relationship between Wallace and Olive, right? And so at the end of the story, we see that Olive is, you know, emotional, she's in tears, and I couldn't figure out if she was crying because she's is she feeling linked? Is she in love? Is this love here? Or is she feeling locked, right? Is she kind of feeling like, well, this is just the way my life is going to be right now, and I might as well just, you know, say yes to Wallace because, you know, I'm obligated to him, as opposed to, you know, I have an immense sense of love for him. I think it's very complex, it's very complicated, but I did want to ask you, why was she crying? Is she crying because like
I think she was crying because she ended up with, instead of what she wanted, what she needed.
Right.
That was my perspective of that. That like he had everything that she needed was right in front of her all the time, but what she wanted
was Isaiah
wasn't having the same kind of vibe. He had the coverings of it. he had the nice look of it, but he wasn't ready to share that. And she assumed that she, like, I don't know, she knew all the things about Wallace that she found out at the end. But my take on that was like, okay, here, this is what I needed, was right here all the time. Damn.
So it's like this realization, like oh my gosh, it was right here before me. Because I kind of felt like after she said bye to Isaiah, it was kind of like you know, almost like a mourning of what could have been. I thought maybe it could have been a mourning of like, okay, I was hoping for this and I couldn't have it, and so I'm mourning the loss of this potential relationship, and now I'm going to be with Wallace, because she had multiple opportunities to be with Wallace, right? And now she's like, okay, there's an obligation here. He's not well, right? I need to be. He's depending on me to, you know, to help and support him, right? I wasn't sure. I was curious if the author might be able to give us a little bit of insight in terms of how Olive was really feeling there.
I also feel like she had the need to take care of something. And she wanted to be able to take care of I forgot his name with the car, but
Isaiah,
but he was like he said, no, we was cool, right? We was just doing this. Now, don't be getting attached. It was like the facade. But yes, author, let's hear from you.
So thank you so much for the questions. And so with Olive, Well, as a writer, there are things I can confidently assert in terms of clarifications. At the same time, there are things where I can leave it to the imagination and the interpretation of the readers. and
Good answer.
But with Olive, you know, Olive, she's very, in a previous book club discussion, I believe one of the members talked about optimism and how it how there was like this sense of hope that Olive basically received like a blessing, right, after Wallace proposed to her. I think it was Jen. Was it Jen? And I think there is optimism. I also think that there's a sense of melancholy, and the possibility that that optimism and melancholy can both exist simultaneously. And she cares about Wallace, Olive. Olive cares about Wallace. Wallace is her friend. Wallace is there for her in ways that not many people in her life are. And Olive in the story has gotten to a point in her life where she's experiencing a lot of challenges, challenges. I believe there was feedback about how Olive was burdened, how she just had so much that she was going through, regarding looking for a full-time administrative position, regarding her rheumatoid arthritis, regarding not making enough money for her to be able to afford to travel to visit her son and her grandsons. Olive was going through so much, and what are the emotional ramifications when someone has a choice to make? And I think that was mentioned too in a previous book club discussion, the theme of choices. I think Brandon talked about that. The choices can be very powerful and they can be very consequential. What does that look like emotionally? Right? Would she have accepted Wallace's proposal if she had the full-time administrative job that made a lot of money, right? Where she made a lot of money, where she was able to regularly visit her son and grandsons. Would she have said yes still? And I won't answer that question, but that's a question that readers can can answer for themselves. Like, if Olive didn't have all of the challenges that she did, would she still have said yes to Wallace's proposal?
No.
No, I had it, not an issue, but something to sort of bring to your attention that I thought was weird. It seemed like you gave the characters ailments in that proposed story, ailments that were beyond their age. Like they had arthritis and different things you would think of as quote unquote old people's, even though young people have arthritis and things like that. But it just felt like in reading the story, they read older than their ages. And I just wanted to, I'm sure that was intentional.
So, all right. So usually I can be very shy about about, talking about various inspirations behind my work, but in the context of Proposed. So I will say that that one of the inspirations behind Proposed was that a woman that I know, and I won't say who, but a woman I know, she at the time was in her 50s, and she had rheumatoid arthritis, and she had received a marriage proposal from a friend of hers, and she wanted advice, and she wanted to know what I thought, what my thoughts were, and I just thought that question was so fascinating, so fascinating, and again, I won't say who, but
will we recognize her name if you said
We're-
somebody famous?
I won't say who.
I know a few women like that. I live in Connecticut. I know some people in Connecticut. I know some people in New York.
Yeah. So
down south, I know those women.
So so thank you so much for the for the feedback regarding the story and the choices regarding Olive's character. So to me, that was such a fascinating question, right? And what does that look like emotionally? Now, what I will say is that the woman, she did not accept the proposal ultimately, or to my knowledge, she did not accept the marriage proposal. When writing the story, and this is where fiction, is so, can be so important in terms of when you're writing stories and if you're inspired by certain things, but it's not a memoir, it's not nonfiction, it's fiction. It's really, thinking about when you're writing out characters, what choices will they make? What will they do given the circumstances in that story? So with Olive, she was going through so much, and if she didn't experience those ailments, if she didn't have the stack of envelopes of bills to pay, if she had the life that she wanted, to the point where she wouldn't even think about or wanting to completely change her life, because the story was about her trying to change her professional and personal life, and her just trying to create a new life for herself. And the challenges that she experienced made that very difficult for her to do. What does that look like emotionally? So in terms of the ailments, that's what they were.
We got a late start, so I guess we can go for another 15 minutes if anybody has any more questions.
I had a quick question, Kim. You said that True Perfect was your favorite story to read out loud.
Yes.
Why is that?
I just really enjoy reading True Perfect, the words and the imageries, the setting when the main character is talking about the roses, that her significant other will like he will have roses in his apartment to honor his grandmother. To me, I love all of my stories. True Perfect, there's just such an emotional resonance in that piece that I really enjoy reading out loud. Is that Miss Savage?
Yes.
Can we ask you to
Miss
read
Savage?
it?
Miss Savage, I think it was you who read the interview about the meanings of locked gray, linked blue.
It was.
Miss Savage, thank you so much for doing that. That meant so much to me. It means so much to me. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. Well, you know what? I read a lot of your articles that you had out there, so I like to do a little bit of research. So I really found that fascinating too, to know the reason behind it. And I was going to say it in an earlier meeting, but then I couldn't find it on my desktop. So but I like that you told the reason why, so that helped understand a little bit better.
Thank you so much, Miss Savage.
You're welcome. It's Tara. You can call me Tara. I don't know how to change my name on there, so I'll just.
Thank you so much, Tara.
You're so welcome, Kim.
Miss Kim, can we ask you to read to us True Perfect?
Ooh, that would be great.
Oh, wow, really? Is that okay?
Let's do that. Yes, Brenda. Yes, Brenda. Thanks for that.
Is that all right?
Yes, totally cool.
Yeah.
Totally up to you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that would be nice.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. Okay. True Perfect. We have the talk. We're sitting on your living room floor, facing each other, listening to Al Green on your stereo. You say you want me in your life for good. Saying I want that too would make you disappear. You scoot over closer to me and enfold me. Your arms are bars of brawn and mine are wiry. Strong like my faith in you, but thin like my faith in this. You say the right words, do the right things, smell the right smells. Even so, something is off. It's your perfection. Perfect like your apartment. It's not your soft suede couch that feels like I'm being hugged by feathers when I nap on it, or your framed black and white photos of your favorite jazz musicians, who are also my favorites, hanging on your living room walls. Nor is it the bookshelf in your bedroom holding graphic novels featuring superheroes I knew and grew up with. It's not the glass vase your grandmother gave you sitting on your coffee table that you fill with fresh red roses every Sunday since she died to honor her. I remember you told me during our second date that she thought red roses were nature's ambassadors of glamour. It's not any of those that makes your home perfect. It's the top drawer in your dresser you cleared out for my clothes 2 weeks ago. You did that without me ever asking you to, without prompts. You said that your home was mine and you wanted to be ready for when I would begin to believe that. Your perfection is not in how you view the world, that it's a large divided sphere where you believe people should help and encourage each other to make it less large, less divided. It's not in the loyalty you demonstrate every day to your family, your friends, and to me. It's not in how you smile or how you offer genuine laughs at my sorry attempts to show wit through mostly unfunny and unkind jokes. It's in how you hold me and how you're holding me now. You make our embrace easy and natural, but terrifying, like jumping on a trampoline or floating on an ocean without a boat nearby. 15 years ago, my mother told me men like you existed after she learned my father left her. You see the good ones only in your sleep, she said. She sat down on our kitchen floor, gripping her empty beer bottle like it was a rescuing hand pulling her up. She was tired. The long, weary life kind of exhausted. For years, I watched her try with futile effort to make the man who refused to marry her love her. He is now married to another woman and has 4 young children. I wonder what his wife had over my mother to compel him to make her legal. Maybe she has what I have now that makes you want me the way you do. 2 months ago, I told my mother that I was seeing a wonderful man, smart, kind, family-oriented. And the winning trait, he loves me. The kind of love that never lets down. She didn't believe me. She still doesn't. I don't blame her. On second thought, I do. I blame my mother for wanting happiness from someone other than herself, for not seeing beauty, joy, and timelessness every time she sees her own reflection. I blame my father for spending empty years with her only to check out when it was convenient for him. I blame you for wanting to revoke, revise, rewrite, all of that. I blame me for not letting you try. I loosen my arms and kiss your cheek. You smell like rosewood, dark, sturdy, sweet. I inhale you like I'm taking one final breath. I get up off your floor and stand erect, as if I am a soldier ready to salute you, my head held up, my eyes looking forward. You are true, but my stance is false. I am not brave. I turn to walk to your door, thanking God that I have my essentials, my car keys and wallet in my back pocket. I say I'm going out for a walk. You want to come with me. I ask you to stay here. The weather's cold and I want you to stay warm. I hope you will always stay warm. I tell you I will be back. You believe me.